Welcome everybody to today's chat. I am so thrilled about today's chat because I know that I have a grand love affair with trees, and I'm assuming that other people either do, or they might be flirting with trees, or they may want to know a little bit of the wisdom that our guest Sitara today is going to share with us. So welcome. If you have not been with us before, welcome to the Moving Fearlessly community. We are an online chat series and we come to you wherever you are in the world. You can join us online every week. And what we do is we host amazing being and thought leaders, and we give them the space to share their wisdom with us and the world. And this is a collaboration. This is a collaboration between fearless communicators and moving communication. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but let's just begin in the way that we like to begin, both in fearless communicators and a little bit of moving communication. So the first thing that we do at our fearless communicators events is, and this is something that I actually learned working with African American communities when I was based up in New York, is that we ask the elders of our community permission to begin. So this is our way of acknowledging the wisdom of our elders in our community and giving them their position that they have well deserved. So if you in our community today acknowledge yourself, you get to self-identify as an elder, what I asked you to do is just to give me a little bit of what we call elevated sparkulation, a little bit of a wave of your hands. Thank you. We have some permission to begin from our elders. Thank you very much, elders. We are so pleased that you are here. We also acknowledge country. So I am currently standing on Kalinago Carib land here in Barbados, and I acknowledge that I am a guest on this land, and I acknowledge all of the elders and ancestors, past, present, and emerging. And if you feel so inspired to, and we do encourage it, if you want to put the land where you are today, because we're coming from different corners of the world, if you want to do that, throw that into the chat so we can see. So Ben's in Lenape land, Gadigal for Johanna, Turrbal for Jen. So we're going to see all of the different amazing spaces and all of those beautiful lands that we are guests on. They all have beautiful trees. We also at Fearless Communicators like to acknowledge that we are a US-based company. And at the moment in the world, we feel it is responsible for us to claim that we live in a world that has persistent and overwhelming institutional racism, ageism, ableism, LGBTQ+phobia, and misogyny. And we use our voices, our stories, and our bodies in the hope of the dismantling of those oppressive systems so that we can all work towards the freedom, equity, and justice that we all actually really want. So we come to you with that energy. We come to you in a warm embrace in our community today. And as I said, Moving Fearlessly is a collaboration between Fearless Communicators, which I'm representing today. It is a US-based company, but we work globally. And a part of that work was coming to Australia. We first came to Australia in 2018, where we had our program at the time was Fearless Force, which supports women to share their visionary stories. And Johanna was one of our first participants, and so was Jen Barkman, who's with us on the call. And our guest today, Sitara, was one of our participants when we came for the second year. So when we started managing what's going on in the COVID reality of the world, when I was up in New York and everything was like March, at Fearless Communicators, what we decided to do was to pull the amazing thought leaders that we know within our community that we have supported to speak powerfully, to come and be with our community so we could create community space for conversations, and we could also begin to leverage the amazing wisdom of our thought leaders in answering all of the questions that we had at that time and creating the connection that we all crave. So we started the Fearless Chat series, which we are now in the early 40s of those chats. Give it a few weeks of running into those chats, and then Johanna put up her hand and said, "Excuse me, what about Australasia? what about doing a chat series down here? And we went, well, yes, and then we created this.
Here we are.
Here we are. Here we are with Moving Fearlessly, Chat 21. I'm now just going to take a little moment to give Johanna a moment of time as my co-host to just bring us all together on Planet Zoom and connect us up before we begin with our guest today, Sitara. So over
thanks,
to you,
Deb. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here. It's evening, or with the various locations, I think, we're around Australia and the world. So I'm going to invite us to, first of all, I always like to just look at people. Let's just look at these screens and see each other. Who's here, the various faces. It's a short time we're here, but so we may not get to, I don't know, meet more, but let's just see each other. Be aware of our focus of seeing and being with. And now to get a sense of being with, I'm going to invite us to take a breath into our body. In my work, Moving Communication, I align the mind and the body, the spirit, the heart, and do a little stretch of some sort to, make that shift. We've just been hearing a lot about us. I don't know about you, but I've had a busy morning already. Let's just come into our body a bit as a way to get present with each other. If you see someone doing something that inspires you, like I'm seeing Jen really going for it there, I too am going to really go for it. And just put a real stretch in. Move that part of your body that needs a little stretch. Your hips, and we're going to come back. Just one last thing that often gets forgotten in terms of the stretching is our face. So we're all going to pull a ridiculous face right at the screen all at once. 1, 2, 3, go. Great. I think that hopefully will help us all arrive a little bit more together.
Thank you, Johanna. So today we have the privilege of hanging out with Sitara Gare, who, when I met, I was so intrigued because Sitara is a tree whisperer. And I love trees, but I definitely was not whispering to them. So I was so interested in meeting Sitara, and then so delighted when she joined us for our 2019 Sydney program for Fearless Force, where she crafted a whole speech about her relationship with trees and how they have shared their wisdom with her. And through working with her through the program, I learned so much about trees and was able to be there in the audience at the Fearless Force event in Sydney and watch her deliver this signature speech on the wisdom of trees, which you can all check out on YouTube. And you're all going to get a link to that speech in an email that I'm going to send you, because you really do want to check it out. But the thing I want to share with you is I learned so much. I learned so much that I then, on holiday with my family in Australia, chose to share with my sisters what I had learnt about trees. And now, more than a year later, we still reference our relationship with trees. And I won't give it away now because I know Sitara might be talking about it. But there's certain buzzwords around trees that me and my sisters use. So by being with Sitara, I have actually begun to not only create a different relationship with trees for myself, but also with my family. And I do have great appreciation for the wisdom that you have, Sitara, and also for how generously you share it. And so everybody, it is my wonderful, great, moving, fearlessly pleasure to introduce our guest today, Sitara Gare.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Deb. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your mornings, your evenings, your middays, wherever you are in the world, to join me this morning to talk about the somatic wisdom of trees. I'm very excited. I get very excited when I get to talk about trees. And so I'm going to try my best to not get off track. And yeah, and so I just want to acknowledge all of you for turning up here. Now, firstly, a little bit about myself, and quickly, just if you have things that you want to say, you can put them in the chat room, and Deb will keep an eye on that, and she'll bring some of those things to my attention as we go along. So you don't have to, you know, this is an interactive event. So yeah, I just thought I'd let you know that. Now, a little bit about myself. I didn't know that I was into trees or gardening. I had come from a long line of gardeners. I was not interested whatsoever. And then at 30, I had burnout. And I had an experience which is in my Fearless Communications talk. But essentially, the vulnerability of that burnout created a space where I started to decide, I decided to garden. And through that experience, I then ended up having a spark and going on to a completely different career area. And so I'd always thought that I was in healing modality, I was a counsellor, this is my line. And then bang, I did a complete turnaround at 30. And then through studying trees, I just became really obsessed, and I felt like this is my purpose. And I started to notice things about trees, and even about the language that's used within arboriculture. And I started to make connections. And I also started to make connections because I was listening to people every day talking about trees and their problems with trees. And so, I, you know, through my arboriculture training, I started to, you know, we focus a lot on reading the body language of trees. So that's what I want to share with you today. And I want my observations and learning about the body language of trees really started to develop into like a tool, like, you know, for loss of a better word, a spiritual tool that I could use that provided me with nudges, that provided me with support. It's provided me with feedback through developing this relationship, through spending time with trees and getting to know trees, individual trees and groups of trees, and how they actually interact. And this is what I want to share with you today. And so I'm going to share some slides, but I'm not going to get too over involved with the slides.
Yeah, so as Sitara said, if as we're going through, if there's any particular tree story or memory or a question that you have for Sitara, feel free to type that in the chat, because I'm going to be watching that and supporting Sitara with like bringing anything to the group's attention or to her attention. If there's any points where we want to like dig in a little bit deeper or get to, pardon the pun, the root of it all.
Root of it all.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think I'm going to have to give you a lot of statistics or research about the benefits of spending time with trees, but what I will tell you is that this research in the moment is booming, and the results are all in the favour of spending more time in nature and more time connecting to nature and the outside world. Now, there's a lot of therapies. I'm currently studying ecotherapy myself, which is a broad term for a lot of different types of therapies. And so there's horticulture therapy, there's forest bathing, and there's also really practical things like doctors actually prescribing time in nature to reduce recovery time after medical procedures. So there has been research done, and it was done like over 10 years ago, where they compared a person's recovery time in a hospital that looked out onto a concrete square compared with a person in recovery after an operation looking out onto green space. And the person looking out the window you know, just, you know, had better recovery time. So I think that under the current circuit situation, in some, you know, in some countries with lockdown, I think people have become acutely aware of their time in, you know, their available time even to be able to go out into nature, or even their inability of time to connect to their favourite places, or to have time within green space. And so I've noticed myself that the parks have been just so packed with people spending time in local parks, you know, in heavily urban areas. And so with
Tara, let's just pause for a second, because let's just take a breath. And I think this is a good moment before we dive into a lot of the content to just take a moment for yourself as a set point at the beginning of the chat. How's your relationship with nature been in the last 6 months? And has it shifted? Has it changed? Because I know mine has. Sitara and I have spoken about the fact, you know, because we talk about trees a bit now, because Sitara's my tree whisperer. But I just think, you know, just notice for yourself. And if there's anything particular that you want to share, this is a good time to put something into the chat for us so we can kind of see where our community is. So sorry, Sitara, I just wanted to get a little pulse on the group. Yeah, so feel free to write anything in the chat, but also Sitara, what have you noticed about your relationship?
I've just developed places, favourite places to visit that are like little secret places that, because I live near the bay, I find that a huge amount of people are down by the bay, and it's actually not so enjoyable. So I've been going up, you know, to the little quiet places in my local parks that probably haven't been so popular with lots of people. Like, I think people have been traveling to go and walk along the bay, and so I've really enjoyed just going around the wetlands and spending time there.
So we've got a couple of comments in the chat that I think is going to speak to what you're talking about, Sitara. Like Johanna's saying, like, seeking out nature more, and Ben goes even a step further with saying not only seeking out, but being outside has become a necessity for him. And Claire says, I desire hideaways for being still and to re-energize. Yeah, great. And Marianne, it's an escape. Yeah.
So there is going to be some new terms that I'm going to introduce that are arboricultural terms, and I am going to talk about those terms in regards to reading the body language of trees, and I'll give you a couple of photos and we can talk about those examples, and then I'm going to talk about how that actually inspires us and supports us. So I'm just going to go there, and
Beautiful.
so I think that the lessons that we have available to us, and this time is especially pertinent now through time, you know, through COVID, because lots of people are struggling, and so I think it's really a great time to be reintroduced to the beauty of the outside world. Now, the three things that I'm going to talk to you about in regards to the body language of trees, and so self-optimizing is just a general term that's used, and it refers to that trees basically respond to mechanical and physiological stresses, And so one example of mechanical stresses is wind. And so we've just had a storm yesterday, and in looking at the trees blowing around in the wind, trees don't blow around in the wind like they're one sail. They actually oscillate. So each individual little limb moves around in the wind and it responds. And so they respond individually. And so you'll usually see, like after a storm, there might be one little live branch that's fallen. And so, yeah, so branches actually oscillate and they respond to prevailing winds, and they grow in a way that strengthens their ability to respond to wind. Now, there's response growth can be foliage growth, it can be wood, or it can be root growth. And so wood is actually referred to as reaction wood. And I just firstly want to look at this tree with you. And so you can see that the tree's on a lean. This tree's right in the middle of the CBD in Brisbane. Well, it was. It's actually been removed because it was, as you can see, there's hardly any foliage on it. So it was actually diseased. And you can see where the lean, because of the lean, the tree has put down the aerial roots there to support itself. It's like nature's props. And so when it comes to response growth, you know, it can be either geotropism, which is a term referring to the tree growing against the natural, you know, natural way of growing, you know, for gravity. And then the other one is phototropism, so growing towards the light. And so when you look at trees, they actually, they tell you a story. And so this tree, you know, there's a few things going on, but this tree could have been pushed over when it was really young. It could have actually had surrounding trees, and it's grown in response to grow away from the other tree, so it could have space to grow to, and it would grow towards the light. And this tree actually, this type of fig tree has a genetic predisposition to putting down aerial roots, where other trees would not necessarily do that. And so, yeah, so that's really interesting observation about the tree. Now here, this tree, so this tree, this is a classic example of phototropism, where the tree has literally going around the other tree, and it's done this really gnarly sort of amazing body language where the limbs are going to the side and to you know, to basically to chase the sun. And so lots of trees will put in a lot of energy into the areas where they're stressed, and they will take energy from where they're not stressed. And so this is one of the things that I really, the way that arborists would talk about things to do with trees, really I found, you know, quite amazing. You know, actually the fact that a tree knows where it's stressed and where it needs to put energy in at a particular moment in time, and it does it in tree time, so it does it slowly. And whether a tree will actually fail or not fail can be dependent on time, because trees need time to develop reaction wood and response growth. And yeah, trees are really amazing. Once you start to see how strong they are and what they're capable of doing in the most, you know, constrained spaces, especially in you know, in the city. So
yeah, I remember Sarah, when you taught about the oscillating of the trees.
yeah,
Thing that I shared with my sisters, because I remembered like taking the metaphor of like when the big wind comes to my life, if I go stiff against it, I'm going to get snapped. Like I'll snap a branch or my trunk. And so my sisters and I would literally say, "Are you oscillating?" Like when something big's happening in our lives, we say to each other, "Oscillate, oscillate." Like take the pressure in each limb, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
Metaphor.
it's a great metaphor, and sometimes there's sacrifices that trees make. They may let a limb go, and then to save the others. There's all these really amazing things that happen with trees. So the other thing I think is really interesting is when you start to look at the body languages of trees is reaction wood. So there's two types of reaction wood, and one is tension wood, and so that's the ropes that pull up the tree. And so if you have a look on the street side of this tree, you can see that there's actually like this line, and you can see how the tree's trying to pull it up. Now this tree's got a bit of a friend in the building, and so it hasn't got a massive amount of tension wood because it's not needed, because it's resting on that building there. And but the other type of wood is compression wood. So that's on the bottom side, right at the base of the tree. It's a little bit hard to see there, but I've got another photo coming up. But so in particular trees, you'll see the tension wood is on the upper side. So these sort of trees, they pull themselves up. And then in North America with conifers, it's the opposite. All the energy is in the pushing. It's not in the pulling, it's the opposite. So even that in itself is really interesting, how in the Northern Hemisphere, the trees will be helping themselves in a different way than the trees in the Southern Hemisphere. So here's another example. So this is what I call tree muscle and tree wrinkles. And you can see on the underside of this big branch that there's wrinkles. And so that's a compression wood. And so you can see sometimes where the tree's struggling to lift the limb up because of the sheer weight of the timber. And then you can see that literally underneath all the muscle, how the tree's lifting itself up and putting on that reaction wood to to help itself. The tree doesn't want the limb to fail or fall or snap off. It actually it's putting a lot of energy into reducing the stress around the base of the limb or the branch. And so trees decide where to put their energy. They decide where to put their sugars. They decide where to put their growth. And they have, you can see trees when they're stressed and they're struggling, and because they'll be putting a lot of energy towards a particular wound or something else. And you can see that in the tree, in the foliage. If the foliage is looking sparse or the color's looking a little pale green, these will be indicators that the tree's struggling. Now, so all of these things in reading the body language of trees is really how it's really helped me is by going out and spending time with trees. And I mean, like what Claire was saying about going out and in the silence, using time in nature to re-energize. And sometimes I will take questions with me when I go out, and I don't always get an answer, and I don't think we're always meant to get an answer, but I will spend time with a tree, and I'll really I'm developed much better attunement in slowing down my mind and tuning in through my body into the feeling of what that tree somatically feels like what's its bark like, where are the branches going, where is the reaction wood, all of these things. And then I become more aware of, you know, where does my energy go in that moment, and how does that make me, you know, how do I feel about that energy, and interpreting, you know, sometimes it's just a somatic feeling and there's no words that come, and sometimes there are words, you know, about what my next step may be if I'm struggling with something. And so I really, you know, it's not a challenge like going out and spending time in nature. It's not, you know, for growth. It's not so, you know, it doesn't, it's not confronting. Like, you may not always like what you hear. Yeah, you may not always like it, what the tree's got to tell you, but nonetheless, you develop a relationship, and it creates a space within yourself to be more aware of where you're going, and what may be your next step. And so,
sorry, I'll just say there's a couple of comments in the chat here that are speaking to what you're talking about. I think there's some people who are creating their relationships. Diana goes and lays her head in her heart, head against a tree to gather some energy. And Rana here says, I delight in the trees in my neighborhood. I visit, is that Sukoa? Is that how I say it?
Yeah.
With my partner and or my dog nearly every day, and we have learned so much from this tree and her family. It feels like what you were talking about there. That was from Rana, and then Jen's talking about trees are one of the reasons I started Vipassana meditation. I saw a comment by a Buddhist monk about the oneness with trees, and each time I go on a 10-day sit, I delight in noticing the movement of trees and being with them. So there is this developing relationship. And Johanna, stillness and silence seems important in that relationship. Yeah, great. So yeah, share with us a little bit more about that developing relationship and the listening to, because I can understand what you're talking about, but I'm not sure if everyone's, you know, if you haven't actually sat and listened to a tree before, how do you start?
Really about creating an intention and time, you know, and the reality is it's really enjoyable, even if you just come back feeling a little bit relaxed. It's not like you have to drag yourself to the gym, you know, oh, this is going to be great for my future self. You know, it's not, you know, it's actually really enjoyable. So it's not painful to do it, but you do have to set up an intention. It's like when you go away on a holiday to somewhere really beautiful out, not far from town, and on that weekend you go, oh, I must do this more often. And then you come back to the city, and then you get caught up in city life again. Before you know it, you're overbooked and you don't get that weekend away again. It's about setting the intention that you want to do, you know, that you want to spend it and eat time in nature. And so it's just about finding a space where, you know, you don't have many people around. You know, if you're in a really urban area and you've got people in parks around you, it doesn't really matter. City people aren't paying attention to other city people, you know. And so, yeah, just sitting down with the tree and really, and just asking permission to be there, and permission just to relax. It just has to start with that. It doesn't have to be a big wow. I think a lot of times, even if we hear the word awe, we're thinking it's got to be some amazing experience, where I think a lot of time it's actually drilling back down into subtleties and because trees, the way they grow with slowness, they're very, very subtle beings, and it's very gentle. And so that it's real. And I mean, we really need that. We need that energy more than ever, rather than this bam, 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 busy, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. This way has not been helpful for us. And so as individuals, as a society, and as a world, this way of going down, and I think COVID's really brought that home, because we had to focus on what's important and come back into our homes. It's made things rough for some people. They're not having good times in their relationships. It highlighted how busyness was hiding things that they needed to address. And so I think that's actually, I'll show you this picture is really fantastic here of this tree. This 1 minute.
I'll just read out some more in the chat, Sitara, while you pull up the picture. Marianne says, one of my truly joyful experiences walking in the redwood forest in New Zealand. The trees were so tall and magnificent, you couldn't help but be immersed in their uniqueness. And then she asks a great question, which maybe we'll get to. What's your favorite tree or forest memory experience? And then from Christine, I taught my 3-year-old granddaughter to put out our hearts against a tree and ask a question. I'm already loving that. She asked me if it had spoken to me and what it had said. Just love. What did the tree say to you? She said, you'd better go home now or your ice cream will melt. That's a wise tree. That's beautiful, Christine.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then Jen, a little bit from Tasmania. I did a walk in Tasmania around the Tarkeen, and one of the big old growth forest trees was like a silent sentinel. It was magnificent.
Yeah. So here, I'm not sure if you can, I'll just...
Can you make it the slide bigger, Sitara?
Like that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So there's some trees that are actually genetically programmed to fail, to fall over, sorry. And falling over doesn't mean that they're failing. So they actually thrive. And so I think this was a really amazing lesson. This particular tree is a cottonwood tree. So it's used by lots of indigenous people for weaving, and not non-indigenous settler people use it for weaving. And you find them a lot around the coastal areas. And so what the local governments, when the tree falls over, they don't remove the tree. They create space for the tree to continue to grow. And the tree actually thrives after falling. So trees really show us that about resilience, and against a lot of odds, they, like us, still grow. They have periods where they struggle, and they have times where they thrive. And so it's an ongoing process, like our lives. And it doesn't mean a failure to fall and to have a setback or to struggle at times. And so, yeah, I really love these trees. And there's some where they've, at Scarborough, where they've actually made a playground around the trees, because the kids, you can imagine how much fun that is when you're a kid running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
amazing playground.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So, and now there's other trees where they need some help. And so this is another amazing thing. So this tree here, so we put in these props to hold up the limbs. And so this tree, you know, there's trees that because of their age, they've got poor structure, they have you know, prone to pest and disease attack, they require help. Now, this tree was transplanted from another park, and after it was transplanted, it never really grew major structural roots. So you can see all the roots around the top, but there's nothing that's gone really deep. And so the tree was quite unstable. And so in the meantime, the branches have grown really, really long and elongated to, you know, to compensate, because it's either roots grow to get nutrients through soil or foliage grows to get nutrients through light and the process of photosynthesis. And so the tree put on a lot of growth to get food through foliage. And in the process, you know, it was just, we could see it was just a matter of time before those limbs were going to fall and snap out. So the tree needed help. And I think this is what this really tells me, and especially in this time of COVID, is that it felt so important to acknowledge when we need help. And I really, when I was typing this up and I saw what's holding you up, it also, you know, there's a double meaning to that. It's like, what's stopping me from asking for help during this time, and what's stopping me from acknowledging that I could be struggling. And so it's not just about spending time with trees to go within, but it's also about spending time with trees can actually remind us that we need to reach out for help and just a chat here, because a lot of us have been very isolated during this time. And also it's about connecting with community, you know, like just this tree in itself, in the fact that it was moved from another site and it really never quite adjusted to its new home. It never really put down roots. And there's some of us that can really relate to that. You know, being displaced and having, because of work, all different sorts of things. I mean, you, Deb, you're in Barbados. You never thought you'd be in Barbados. And you know, and how do you connect with a place, you know, for the time that you're there, to give, to honor that time rather than being resentful of that time.
And it's definitely a connection to nature that does that. It's like helped me feel like for now I have some roots here. Like I'm not going to be permanently planted here. But I did absolutely feel the difference when I felt that I had no roots in the soil. Like you feel really exposed, really vulnerable. The other thing that I'm reminded of now as you're speaking, and there's a couple of things in the chat I want to share with you, Sitara, is years ago after my son passed away, for the first year, I spent a lot of time with trees, and it wasn't only listening to the trees, but the trees I went to because they would listen to me.
Yeah.
They had no judgment about my story. They didn't try to make my grief feel better. They didn't need to even comment on it. And it was, you know, it was hard. I was feeling so much and I needed to connect and I needed to get it out. I needed to express myself because that's who I am. I'm a very expressive kind of person. And I just found so much comfort, and I would literally talk to the trees.
Yeah.
And it felt like I had been heard. It was very comforting. We also have here,
I'll
just share with you, Alison said that she totally agrees with you, Sitara. And she feels like I had a relationship with trees as a child and got further away from it the more I spent time inside. I continue to cultivate that relationship by seeking out ways of being with trees. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think it's really worth highlighting that this is a reciprocal relationship. This is not just a one-way relationship. There is a lot of love from trees that is coming, like they're providing oxygen for us. There is some physical things that they're providing for us, but they're nurturing. Look at them. Look at how beautiful they are. They really sustain us physically and psychologically. You know, that they have meaning for us in our histories, and our personal stories. They're like, you know, like you have songs that trigger you, but there's also trees that trigger you as well. You know, you can have a body memory of a smell of particular trees, of particular species that take you into a particular space and can actually shift your mood through, you know, feeling into that. You know, if you think of one of your favorite places on holidays, because it's all mixed up, isn't it, with the smell, you know, and then the ice creams on the afternoons as you go for the walk, you know, with family, and special times, and solitary times. And I think that we've undersold ourselves about the value of these times. And so really what I want to just, you know, I think what's really important, the message, you know, there's a few takeaways that I want you to have. And you know, first of all, number one is I want you to observe and look at trees differently and notice trees. These are individual trees, and then there's trees within groups, and then there's bigger groups, you know, and communities of trees. But have a look at your local trees and start to observe what they're telling you in their body language. And then start to, you know, I want to invite you to, you know, develop your skills of observation, and you know, and it would be great actually if in the chat you could mention some of the things that you notice about trees. That you know, are you really into bark? Like, bark is a thing in itself, hey. And then and then there's
a whole talk on just bark.
Oh yeah, I could go on for hours about bark. I gotta tell you, bark is wonderful.
Yeah.
And then there's leaves, like there's foliage, like, and like there's particular sounds, like she oaks have a particular sound with the wind that is unique to she oaks. There's no other species that has that sound. Yeah. Now, how wonderful is that? Like that's great. And then yeah, and just become aware of your local trees, and start to think, you know, start to look at how you can develop a relationship with trees. And you know, even if you can't get out, if you're in a unit and you can't get out, and you can just have a little garden on your balcony, that is going to provide you with some sort of relaxation, like a nurturance, you know, just to go and spend time on your balcony, you know, have a cup of tea, 15 minutes, and just give yourself time out in the day. Like if you're in a severe situation of lockdown where you are limited of when you can go out, you can still have that relationship at home. And I want to just issue, you know, what you know, ask the question, what would you like to bring into your life through acknowledging trees? And yeah, that's you know, there's an invitation there, a general big question of, you know, what is it?
What would you like to bring into your life? Acknowledging trees, building a relationship with trees. Let's get a couple of those in the chat. I was noticing here in Barbados, there's a walk I take to get to the beach. And I end up kind of like in the last bit before I hit the sand, I walk through some trees. And because I'm so keen and so ready to get to the ocean, it took me a while to notice that I'm not noticing the trees I'm walking past. Like my vision was right on the ocean and the horizon. So now I've just started to slow down. And one of the things that I'm loving about these trees is they have those roots that are like really big, you know, that kind of, they come out of the soil, that you could crawl into them. What are they called? Buttress roots?
Yeah, that's right. Buttressing roots.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about trees. And I was like, oh, I've been walking past buttress roots for weeks and I hadn't noticed. Noticed now. So Johanna, that we all grow and are shaped in a myriad of ways in response to our environment, that we are strong and have roots. Beautiful, Johanna. What else are people going to bring into their worlds as we move from our community today into your own space? So Jen, I want to notice the bark more and also notice the smaller trees. Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Ben, slowness and growth over time. I can feel that one. Yeah. Rana, long and broad view of time. Beautiful. Yeah, there's so much in the relationship that can be developed. And Sitara, do you find that if you have a relationship with a particular tree or a particular collection of trees that your listening develops more, or that doesn't matter so much?
It does develop more. I mean, it is like a type of practice, in like a meditation practice, in that there's ebbs and flows. And also, because I'm not a person that's really rigid. And so as soon as I develop a habit, the habit goes usually. You know, I always was like, that's it. I'm going to have this for 5 days every day, or I'm going to yoga on Tuesdays for the rest of my life. And then, of course, it doesn't happen. It's out the window. And and so I just decided that I'm going to be okay with the fact that there's particular trees I go to if I'm missing someone, like what you were talking about with your son. Yeah. And then there's particular trees that are like my question trees, you know?
Love that. I want a question tree.
You can have a question tree.
I'm going to go find one tomorrow.
You know, and yeah, there's all different trees for all different seasons of our life. And there's trees, you can have a happy tree, you know, and this is my chilled out tree. I'm going to hang out with this tree, and I'm going to come and be with you when I really feel like the city's too much. And you know, and you're going to remind me of what it's like to be outside of the city. And you know, there's so much available to us, and it doesn't matter if you go through a period where the tree says nothing to you, or you hear nothing, or you feel nothing, and you just have some time, you know, lying down on the ground beside it. That's not a waste of time, you know.
It's like meditation. Not like you're going to get every time you sit to meditate, but it's still a worthy thing to do every day. And then every now and then you get like little bit of
Yeah.
sun.
That's right.
So Sitara, I just want to acknowledge that there's some great comments here. So there's great insight here great insight, Alison, wisdom for navigating difficult conversations. Let's see what Alison said. So lovely to listen to you before taking my friend's dog for a walk by the local creek. I will look and listen more attentively and take time just to be with the trees. Yes, you will. I love the idea of stopping for a short conversation with a tree. Could give us some wisdom for navigating difficult conversations. Indeed, Alison. Maybe before you have that difficult conversation with a person, maybe try having a conversation with a tree first. I also like that one. So there's so much wisdom going around our community today. Sitara, we are at time. So I'm going to start to move towards the wrapping down. I know you. I know that you could just keep talking. I knew that if we all stayed on the Zoom, we'd all be talking trees, we'd all be sharing stories. Everybody who's with us today, thank you so much for being with us. You are all going to get an email from me, which is going to have a whole heap of different goodness in it. You're going to have ways to connect with Sitara. She has a Facebook and an Instagram, and both of them have different tree love and magic. I personally follow both. You may want to do the same. I'm also going to send everybody the Fearless 4 signature speech that Sitara created last year with Fearless Communicators, because it's a beautiful piece talking about her relationship with how she went through a particular recovery using the wisdom of trees. And I'm also going to make an invitation to you. If there is a story about trees, or there's a particular difference in your relationship with trees that you're now taking on board as you've been with us in this community today, hit reply on that email I send you. Send me the story and I will ensure that Sitara also gets the story, because I love stories, Sitara loves stories, Sitara loves trees, I love trees. We would love to hear your stories, and we haven't had a chance to hear many people's stories today except for the beautiful comments in the chat. But I'm finding myself very curious about all the trees in your lives. And I know Sitara would also love those stories too. So this is my invitation to you all. I thank you so much for being with us. We are at time.